Okay, so continuing here in video 2, I want to talk a little bit about, I just talked about the heart and how cardiac output is increased by the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system has an opposing effect. It decreases the rate of, it decreases chronotropy, and it also decreases ionotropy, I believe. Well, I know at least decreases chronotropy. Anyway, so that results in a decrease in cardiac output, but also, especially in the case of the decrease in chronotropy, that's decreasing the amount of ATP that the heart is needing at one moment. It's decreasing how much energy is going to your heart, which could be a good thing, because remember, your heart also needs, it's served by blood vessels itself. So you don't want to cause tachycardia, is what it's called, which can actually deplete your stores in your heart, and that's not a good thing. In a case where you have coronary artery disease, or your heart is failing, it's not a good thing to have it pumping really fast if you don't need to have it pumping fast. So things like reflex tachycardia and stuff like that, having good parasympathetic tone is probably a good thing, I'm guessing. Moving on, so this is a blood vessel that I try to draw. I'm drawing the brown, basically a smooth muscle here, and the red is the actual, just the body of the blood vessel. So this is also relevant to the autonomic nervous system, but it's basically mostly just relevant. In fact, I don't know of any exceptions off the top of my head. The sympathetic nervous system is what actually regulates your blood vessel tone. So this is mostly your arterioles and maybe some of your intermediate blood vessel diameters, radii. So the sympathetic nervous system, when adrenaline, especially, let's see here, oh, there we go. When epinephrine is secreted, or adrenaline, when that's secreted, that's mostly epinephrine. I think like 20% of it's norepinephrine, but it's mostly epinephrine. Epinephrine mostly acts on your beta 1 and 2 receptors and not much on your alpha receptors. At least you're not much on your alpha 1. Whereas norepinephrine acts on your alpha 1 receptors more, and also on your beta 1 receptors. I haven't really talked much about it, but basically your beta 1 receptor causes this increase in chronotropy and ionotropy in your heart, whereas the beta 2 is mostly concerned with your blood vessels, and the beta 2 actually causes relaxation of your blood vessels, just like it causes relaxation of your bronchi here, because it's causing relaxation of the smooth muscle. So in that case, basically the beta 1 receptor is causing more vasodilation of your blood vessel, but the alpha 1 receptors, which pretty much have a dominant effect, but it depends on which tissues. If it's in your periphery, like near your skin, your alpha 1 receptors are very abundant there. So your alpha 1 receptors are going to activate the GQ signaling, which is going to activate calcium release, and that's going to cause contraction of that vascular smooth muscle and cause less blood flow to your periphery. So if you're in a fight or flight situation, there's some organs like your muscles, you want those to have a lot of blood to go to them. You want to have a lot of blood going to the important things, but you don't need a lot of blood going to like just parts of your finger. You don't really need a lot of blood there right now, right? You don't need a lot of blood going down to some of your digestive organs because you're not really doing a lot of digestion. You probably, I'm guessing, don't need a lot of blood going to your liver and these other areas here, and you don't need a lot of kidney filtration at the moment, so you don't really need that stuff happening at that moment in time. You want your blood going, you want moving glucose through and oxygen through to keep you going so you can actually survive, right? So in your case of your sympathetic nervous system, depending on the abundance of the alpha 1 receptors, you're causing a vasoconstriction, especially in your periphery, whereas areas like your aorta here, you actually have the beta 1 receptors are actually causing dilation, and also probably the beta 2. But I think this is a case where beta 1 receptors might cause, they do cause dilation of this blood vessel. So that's a good thing because that's your main artery and that serves the rest of your body. So having that relax is a good thing. Well, I guess unless you have problems with your like the actual blood vessel, it might blow up, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, moving on. This is I drew a little blood platelet here. Adrenaline also activates your alpha-2 receptor. I guess especially norepinephrine would, but remember there's 20% norepinephrine in your adrenaline that's secreted from the adrenal medulla. In that case, that actually inhibits, the alpha-2 is inhibitory towards the cyclic AMP pathway. So, and this is really weird, but your blood platelets, those actually, when you have a decrease in cyclic AMP, you have an activation of the clotting pathway, and I think an increase in what the calcium signals are doing in those cells. Whereas if you have more cyclic AMP in your platelets, then you actually have less activation of platelets, which I could see an adaptive value for, because if you're in a fight or flight situation, you want your blood to clot if you get cut or hurt, right? So, all right, moving on. This is your liver here. Actually, first I want to talk about the stomach though. So I didn't draw the superior part of your alimentary canal, but basically ignoring your esophagus and everything else, this is your stomach. The parasympathetic nervous system is activating towards your digestive tract, because those are times when, and I didn't really talk about this earlier, your sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight, whereas your parasympathetic is more your internal processes and your preservation and your planning ahead, your body basically preparing, basically maintenance of your body. So makes your parasympathetic tends to make you hungry, it helps you with digestion, it helps you store glycogen and glucose, basically the glucose that you eat, and I think store fat. So in your stomach here, having your parasympathetic nervous system acting on it, say you see some food and you think it's really delicious, right? Well, your hypothalamus is stimulated up here, right there, I'm sorry, and that basically activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which causes your stomach to prepare. It causes secretion of gastrin, your HCl, like your hydrochloric acid, and stuff, and it gets your stomach ready to receive food and digest it, right? It also causes it to rhythmically contract, and when food goes in there, that causes reflexes to be potentiated. At like every 20 seconds, you have a ripple that goes through your stomach. You have what are called, I think, interstitial cells of Kegel, which actually are pacemaker cells that go every 20 seconds, which potentiate your contractions. These contractions, though, are triggered by reflex. So whenever you have, one of the things about smooth muscle is whenever it's stretched, it wants to contract. It's a reflex. So if you distend your stomach by eating food and it's sitting in there, it causes when it distends, it also triggers a reflex to flex. But that's only potentiated every 20 seconds. So that causes a rhythmic contraction that can move the food through your stomach. And then you have your pyloric area here. You have a pyloric sphincter here that actually lets it into your small intestine here. And I think the first segment is the jejunum, and then you have the ileum somewhere later. So once you go into your small intestine, then your food gets digested here, and it goes into your large intestine, and then eventually out. So the gist of it, though, is the parasympathetic nervous system is stimulatory towards food moving through your digestive tract and being digested, whereas the sympathetic nervous system halts it and it stops it for a while. That's why if you're anxious, you're not as hungry. You don't want to eat as much food and stuff. So, even depression, which would affect your serotonergic signaling, that affects your hypothalamus and affects how much you want to eat and your reaction to food. So, I think my laser pen is running out here. So this yellow area, this is your pancreas. That secretes insulin and glucagon into your endocrine system, which is endocrine means inside your body. I kind of think of the body as a donut. So you have you have the round part, then you have the hole in the middle. So the hole in the middle is like your alimentary tract, like your digestive tract. It comes in and goes out, right? So that would be your exocrine signal. And in a donut, that round part in the middle, the bare area, that's kind of the outside of the donut still, right? So your exocrine system is actually also served by your pancreas, and that secretes pancreatic lipase, amylase, which breaks down sugar, and some proteinase, basically that breaks down protein. Most of your protein digestion occurs in your stomach, though. I think pepsin breaks it down. So the parasympathetic nervous system is activating towards the pancreas, causing it to be more likely to release insulin and some of these other exocrine hormones, or exocrine digestive enzymes. So in the case of insulin, which is a hormone, that goes to your body, goes throughout your body. It causes your muscles, illustrated here, causes your muscles to take up the glucose that you're eating, and it causes your liver to also take up glucose. Insulin does, and also your parasympathetic nervous system is signaling your liver to take up that glucose to build glycogen, which is polymers of glucose by phosphorylating position 6, the hydroxyl group 6 of your glucose, to also eventually build these glycogen polymers, store the sugar. The parasympathetic nervous system shuts down gluconeogenesis, which is the production of glucose, because you don't need to make glucose. If you have a bunch of glucose coming in through your hepatic portal vein, which comes from your small intestine here, which goes through your small intestine and goes through your liver. If you have a bunch of sugar there already, it can sense it, and it knows it doesn't need to make any more glucose. It needs to actually start storing the glucose as glycogen. Doesn't need to make it from amino acids, and it doesn't need to release glucose either, because you already have enough of it in your blood, because your blood keeps going through your body. So that's in the case of your parasympathetic nervous system and insulin signaling. You're not really needing to release glucose from your liver. You're wanting to take it up in your muscle and take it up in your liver and store it away. In the case of your sympathetic nervous system, and this is the celiac ganglion, the celiac plexus, which is a bunch of ganglii. A lot of this is sympathetic, your sympathetic nervous system, which has sympathetic cell bodies in it, of your postganglionic cells. A lot of these some of the splanchnic nerves come to this area. Those signal your liver to it does the opposite. This is in cases where you haven't eaten in a while, or you're in a fight or flight situation. You need to mobilize glucose. You need that glucose right away. You need to go to your muscles. Your muscles need to be ready to use it fast. So in that case, you're in like norepinephrine signaling on your beta or alpha receptors. I think they're beta receptors, but maybe there's alpha receptors in your liver. Those are telling it to break down glycogen, because we need to break it down and secrete into the bloodstream, to secrete the glucose into the bloodstream. And it's also telling it to actually start producing glucose from your amino acids, because just in case, your glucose is your main substrate for energy production. And in the case of like when you're mellowed out, you don't need a lot of glucose to make energy, because you're using your mitochondria and you're making 30 some ATP for every glucose molecule. But in cases where you really need that energy right away, like if you're sprinting like really fast, for example, you first deplete creatine, but then you need to start using that. You need to start making ATP with the glucose you have. Instead of going through a long process in your mitochondria, you immediately can use what's called glycolysis, which is an anaerobic form of ATP production. So in that case, you're not making very much ATP for each glucose molecule. It's like a 15th or like a 10th or something of what you normally would be making in your mitochondria with oxygen. So in that case, you're just blowing through glucose, and then it's being converted to lactate, and then sent to your liver later for processing again. So in that case, you need glucose to be mobilized and to go to your muscles. So that's why this is so important, and that's why glucagon and the sympathetic nervous system are important too. Although in diabetes, people have problems where insulin isn't doing its job, which is why diet and exercise are important. So moving on down, we talked about the pancreas that secretes insulin and glucagon. Glucagon's more responsive or more correlated with your sympathetic nervous system, whereas insulin's correlated with your parasympathetic nervous system, which comes from the vagus nerve, in the case of the latter one. Moving on to your kidney here. This is sorted by your thoracic part of your spine here. When your sympathetic nervous system triggers it, and I don't know if it has any parasympathetics or not going to your kidney. I don't believe that it does. Your sympathetic nervous system tells your kidney to slow down the glomerular filtration rate, which is the blood flowing through your kidney and becoming urine, and it takes up sodium and different nutrients again. But in a fight or flight situation, you're going to want to keep your fluids because you are sweating. There are some other neurons that I'm drawn here that are actually not presynaptic and postsynaptic. It's actually just a presynaptic neuron that goes over to your sweat glands and actually secretes the acetylcholine directly into the cell, and that causes sweat to be secreted in those cases. But you're actually losing fluid through sweat, right? So your kidney, when it receives a signal from norepinephrine, your beta-1 receptor is triggering the release of renin, which I'll talk about in a moment, and it's also activating your alpha-1 GQ signaling receptors that are causing smooth muscle contraction. That causes contraction of your afferent blood vessel before your glomerulus. So less blood is going into your kidney to be filtered, and so more of it's bypassing the kidney and just continuing through your body. But the renin that's secreted from this, that renin activates what's called angiotensin 1, angiotensinogen, and then angiotensinogen 1 becomes angiotensinogen 1 becomes angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 goes through your bloodstream, and at various places you have enzymes that can convert it to angiotensin 2. The primary places in your lung where you have angiotensin converting enzyme, and that's also called ACE. And so when you take drugs like lisinopril, captopril, the other drugs that have pril in them, you're actually inhibiting that enzyme, so it stays as angiotensin 1, okay? But angiotensin 2, if it gets converted to angiotensin 2 by ACE, that that moves throughout your bloodstream. It has five different effects. One is an increase in vascular tone, like more contraction of your smooth muscle in your blood. It also activates, it signals your hypothalamus to signal your neurophysis, which is the dorsal part of your pituitary gland, which secretes two hormones, oxytocin and vasopressin. The relevant one is vasopressin. Vasopressin, also known as antidiuretic hormone, because it decreases the amount of fluid secreted from your kidney by opening up aquaporin channels and allowing the fluid to actually the water to be taken back up again instead of going to your urine, because you want to conserve that water, right? Also, you can activate some of your cortical cells in your, that are not your actual medulla cells, but your cortical cells that are above your kidney there. And those secrete like aldosterone, for example. And aldosterone actually causes an increase in the uptake of sodium in the kidney. So you don't have as much flowing through your kidney, but you also want to increase how much sodium you're taking back out, because you may need your electrolytes. You're also losing electrolytes in your sweat, right? So you're going to want to take those up. That's another effect. It's pretty much activating towards you're basically keeping fluids, increases your blood flush, blood pressure, etc. So, moving on. Let's see. I talked about the digestive tract, the bladder. In the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, through the hypogastric nucleus, or the the hypogastric ganglion or plexus, and the pelvic plexus or ganglion. This area here, that goes up to your bladder. In the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, that's causing contraction of your smooth muscle, your detrusor smooth muscle here, which is, so it's more likely to squeeze urine, have a smaller volume and help you urinate. Also, the parasympathetic nervous system is trying to relax your internal sphincter, which is involuntary. You have two sphincters. You have an external sphincter and you have an internal sphincter. Your external sphincter is controlled by you. So you may feel like you have to pee, but you can still hold it for a while. Your internal sphincter, though, is relaxed by your parasympathetic nervous system, whereas your sympathetic nervous system causes contraction of that. Your sympathetic nervous system keeps you from peeing. Like if you really need to fight or something, you don't need to pee. So that's what your sympathetic nervous system does. There's drugs like tamsulosin and stuff that inhibit the alpha-1 receptor there and relax the smooth muscle and stuff. And there's also other drugs, which I may talk about in another video, like tolterodine and fesoterodine, for example, that cause relaxation of the smooth muscle by, I think, inhibiting the muscarinic 3 receptor, which is GQ activating receptor. All right, moving on. We talked about your skeletal muscle here that I've drawn here. You have your genitals. So the sympathetic nervous system, actually let's start with the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic nervous system is what triggers erection, and I think that's through acetylcholine acting on your endothelium in your cavernosum, which is like a bed of blood vessels. And when it does that, it causes activation of, basically creation of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide diffuses through the endothelium and goes to the vascular smooth muscle, and then it activates cyclic GMP signaling, and that actually causes relaxation of the vascular smooth muscle and allows more blood into the penis, for example, here, and causes erection. Whereas the sympathetic nervous system, which is also involved in sexual behavior, but at a slightly later time, I guess once you're excited, that can also cause orgasm. Orgasm is actually stimulated, though, by the sympathetic nervous system, and that comes through I think the lumbar or sacral areas are served by that. Also, the sacral areas are served by the parasympathetic nervous system, or are serving the genitals from the parasympathetic nervous system. In females, it causes excitation of the clitoris, and sympathetic nervous system also causes orgasm. So yeah, that's basically a summary of the autonomic nervous system. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.